I had spent years making the world believe I was untouchable. To everyone else, I was Liam Carter, the most famous alpha idol in the world. My face was everywhere. Billboards, magazine covers, luxury campaigns, television screens. There wasn't a major brand that didn't want me representing them. Girls screamed my name wherever I went, fans waited outside venues for hours just to catch a glimpse of me, and my songs dominated charts across the world. I had everything an idol could dream of. Fame, money, power. Millions of people calling me their ultimate crush. I had even reached the point where people joked that I practically ran the entire music industry. And maybe they weren't entirely wrong. I could walk into a recording studio and have producers rearranging their schedules for me. I could announce a concert and watch thousands of tickets disappear within minutes. I had built a career where almost everything happened exactly the way I wanted. But right now, I couldn't even make myself eat. I sat silently on my bedroom floor, staring at the table in front of me. It was covered with food. Pancakes, fresh fruit, soup, pasta, grilled meat, rice, pastries, even some of my favorite dishes. My staff had practically emptied the kitchen trying to find something I might be willing to eat. I couldn't touch any of it. The moment I smelled the food, my stomach twisted violently. I covered my mouth and turned my head away. God, I hadn't been able to eat properly for 4 days. 4 days ago, I had discovered the truth. I was 5 weeks pregnant. And I was carrying triplets. Even thinking about it made my chest tighten. I was an alpha. A famous alpha. The kind of alpha people expected to have everything under control. Yet I was sitting alone in my bedroom, terrified of something growing inside me that I couldn't even bring myself to talk about. I picked up a piece of fruit and forced myself to take a bite. The second I tasted it, nausea hit me. I dropped it back onto the plate. No. I couldn't. Everything smelled too strong lately. The scent of meat made me sick. The smell of coffee made my stomach turn. Even some of my favorite foods suddenly seemed unbearable. I had tried forcing myself to eat, but every attempt ended the same way. Nausea. Dizziness. Panic. So, for 4 days, I'd barely left my room. I'd cancelled schedules. Refused meetings. Ignored calls. Even my company staff had started asking if something was wrong. I kept telling them I was exhausted. That I needed rest. That was easier than telling them the truth. Because nobody knew. Not my family. Not my friends. Not my agency. Not my fans. And most importantly, not the father of my children. My fingers slowly curled against my stomach. Ethan Blake. My manager. The man who had been beside me for years. He knew my schedule better than I did. He knew how I took my coffee, which foods I hated, when I needed a break during rehearsals, and how to calm me down before a major performance. He had always been the person I trusted most. And somehow, he had become the father of my triplets. I closed my eyes. I still couldn't understand how my perfect life had fallen apart so quickly. 4 days ago, I had been Liam Carter, the world's most famous alpha idol. Now I was hiding inside my bedroom, unable to eat, terrified to leave the house, and carrying 3 babies whose existence could destroy everything I'd built. And Ethan? Ethan still had absolutely no idea that his manager was sitting alone upstairs, carrying his children. I pressed my palm against my stomach and whispered, "What am I supposed to do with you 3? My relationship with Ethan had started years ago, long before I became the idol everyone knew. Back then, I wasn't the biggest name in the industry. I was just another ambitious young alpha trying to make it, working myself to exhaustion because I wanted to prove that I belonged on the biggest stages. Ethan was already my manager then. Somewhere between the late-night rehearsals, endless schedules, and all the difficult days, we slowly became each other's comfort. I don't even remember exactly when it changed. One day, he was simply my manager. And then, without either of us realizing it, he became the person I looked for whenever everything became too much. Whenever I was overwhelmed, I'd go to him. His scent had always been strangely comforting to me. The moment I was close to him, it felt as though I could finally breathe. All the pressure disappeared, the cameras, the expectations, the criticism, the endless demands of being an idol. Ethan knew how to handle me better than anyone. He knew when I needed to be left alone and when I needed someone beside me. He knew how stubborn I was, how easily I lost my temper, and how much I hated admitting when I was struggling. But Ethan himself was an enigma. He had always been one. Even after all these years, I still couldn't completely figure him out. He rarely showed what he was thinking, kept his emotions carefully hidden, and could remain impossibly calm when everyone else was losing their minds. Maybe that was part of why I was so drawn to him. I was an alpha who could be impulsive, emotional, and impossible to control. Ethan was the opposite. Quiet. Composed. Mysterious. Yet somehow, he understood me better than anyone. When my career began to explode, however, we both realized that our relationship could never become public. My fans weren't simply protective of me. Some of them were obsessive. If I stood too close to another idol, dating rumors would spread within hours. If I laughed with someone during an interview, fans would analyze every little interaction. I'd seen what happened whenever people thought another idol was getting too close to me. The reactions could become vicious. And if they ever discovered that I wasn't dating another celebrity but had secretly been in a relationship with my own manager for years, I didn't even want to imagine the chaos. So Ethan and I decided to hide everything. We were extremely careful. In public, he was only my manager. Behind closed doors, he was the man I loved. No one knew about us except my bodyguard, who had accidentally discovered our relationship and promised to keep it secret. For years, we managed to protect what we had. Then, 1 month ago, everything went wrong. It started because I'd gotten close to another female idol while working on a project. There was nothing romantic between us, but Ethan didn't like how close we'd become. We argued. And for 3 days, Ethan refused to speak to me. Those 3 days were unbearable. I couldn't concentrate properly. I was irritated at everyone around me, and no matter how hard I tried to focus on work, my mind kept returning to him. Eventually, I was the one who gave in. I apologized. We talked. We made up. And that night, after 3 days of anger and distance, neither of us thought about the rules we'd followed for years. We weren't careful. Afterward, Ethan was the first one to realize it. Liam, we weren't careful. I know. You need to take. I'll take the pills, I assured him. I was so certain that it would be fine that I didn't let myself worry about it. Then life swallowed us again. My schedule became hectic. Rehearsals. Recordings. Concert preparations. Flights. Meetings. And somehow, I forgot about that night completely. Until 4 days ago. Until I discovered that I was 5 weeks pregnant. And then came the part that completely shattered me. There wasn't one baby. There weren't two. There were 3. Triplets. The result of the one night Ethan and I had stopped being careful. Now I was sitting alone in my bedroom, staring at my stomach while trying to understand how the secret we'd protected for years could possibly survive this. I'd managed to hide Ethan for years. But how could I hide 3 babies? Sooner or later, my body would change. People would notice. The media would notice. My fans would notice. And Ethan? He still didn't know. The man who had spent years reminding me that we had to be careful had no idea that I was now carrying his triplets. And for the first time, I was terrified that our carefully protected secret was about to become impossible to hide. That evening, before I could even decide what I was going to do, Ethan came home. He had been away for a short trip to visit his parents, and I hadn't realized just how much I'd missed him until I saw him walk through the door. The moment our eyes met, I rushed toward him. I didn't say a word. I simply threw my arms around him and held him as tightly as I could, refusing to let go. Ethan seemed surprised by my sudden affection, but only for a moment. His arms immediately wrapped around me, pulling me against his chest. Missed me that much, baby? I nodded against him. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to think about the pregnancy. I didn't want to think about the 3 babies growing inside me. For those few seconds, I just wanted to be his baby again, the person he always protected and cared for. Ethan chuckled softly before lifting me effortlessly into his arms. I instinctively wrapped my arms around his neck as he carried me inside, pressing soft kisses against my forehead, cheeks, and the corner of my eyes. "Did my baby miss me?" he murmured. I nodded again, burying my face against his shoulder. "I missed you too." He carried me to the couch and sat down with me still in his arms. As usual, Ethan immediately started fussing over me. He asked whether I'd eaten properly while he was gone. Whether I'd been sleeping enough. Whether I'd been working too hard. He checked my face carefully, noticing every little thing that seemed different. That was Ethan. No matter how busy he was, no matter how exhausted he became, he always found a way to take care of me. And that kindness was exactly what broke me. Because suddenly, the fear I'd been holding inside for 4 days became too much. What if he became angry when he found out? What if he blamed me? What if this changed our relationship? What if our carefully hidden life together was suddenly destroyed because of 3 babies neither of us had planned for? My eyes filled with tears. Ethan immediately noticed. His smile disappeared. "Liam?" I looked away. "What happened?" I shook my head. "Nothing." He didn't believe me. He gently tilted my face toward him. "Don't lie to me. What's wrong?" I couldn't answer. My lips trembled, but no words came out. Ethan's expression softened. He brushed his thumb across my cheek. "Baby, tell me." I finally broke. "I'm pregnant." Everything went silent. Ethan stared at me. For several seconds, he didn't move. Then he slowly sat back, as though he needed a moment to understand what I'd just said. Our baby? I nodded. His eyes dropped toward my stomach. You're really pregnant? I nodded again, tears slipping down my cheeks. 5 weeks. Ethan remained silent. Then he looked back at me. How many? My throat tightened. 3. His eyes widened. 3? I nodded. Triplets. For a moment, Ethan simply stared at me. I was terrified of what would come next. But instead of pulling away, he reached for me. His arms wrapped tightly around my waist, drawing me against him. He held me close as if he could somehow shield me from everything I was afraid of. Then he lowered his head and pressed a gentle kiss against my neck. Don't worry, baby. His voice was quiet but certain. We'll handle this. I closed my eyes. I had spent 4 days imagining every possible disaster. I'd imagined Ethan being angry. I'd imagined him blaming me. I'd imagined him regretting everything. But none of that happened. Instead, he held me tighter. Our babies are going to be okay, he whispered. And you're going to be okay too. I finally let myself cry against his chest. For the first time since discovering my pregnancy, I wasn't alone anymore. Ethan knew. And somehow, despite the fear, I knew we would face whatever came next together. That night, Ethan refused to let me think about tomorrow. He could see how frightened I was, how my mind kept running in circles, so instead of asking me to make decisions, he simply stayed close. He took care of me the way he always did. He brought me something light to eat and sat beside me, feeding me small bites while pressing gentle kisses against my forehead and cheeks whenever I tried to turn away. Just a little more, baby. I can't. I know. You don't have to eat much. Just try a little for me. His voice was so gentle that I eventually opened my mouth and accepted another bite. Then another. Somehow, with Ethan beside me, I managed to eat more than I had in days. He smiled proudly and kissed my forehead. Good boy. I couldn't help but smile at him. For a while, we simply stayed like that. Then Ethan brushed my hair away from my face. We don't have to decide everything tonight, he whispered. We'll talk about everything tomorrow. Right now, you need to rest. I nodded. He pulled me into his arms, and I curled against his chest. His scent surrounded me. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear. For the first time in days, my mind finally became quiet. I fell asleep in Ethan's arms without worrying about what would happen tomorrow. Somehow, with him beside me, I felt that everything would eventually be okay. The next morning, Ethan didn't pressure me. After we'd eaten, he sat beside me and gently took my hand. What do you want to do, Liam? I looked at him for a moment before quietly asking, what do you want? Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked down at our intertwined hands. Then he said softly, I want the babies. My heart skipped. I want them, Liam. I want a family with you. He looked directly into my eyes. But I don't want you to think you have to continue this pregnancy just because I want it. I remained silent. Your entire life will change if you have these babies, he continued. Your career, your body, your privacy, everything you've worked for. He squeezed my hand. And if you decide that you can't do this, I won't be angry with you. I won't blame you. I'll understand. His voice softened. You need to think about what you want. Tears immediately gathered in my eyes. Because only days ago, I had been completely certain that I didn't want this. I didn't want them at first, I admitted. Ethan remained quiet, allowing me to speak. I was terrified. I kept thinking about my career. My fans. The media. Everything I'd lose. My voice cracked. But then you came back. I looked down at my stomach. And you held me. Tears slipped down my cheeks. And suddenly, I couldn't imagine giving them up. I covered my face as I began crying. I hate this. Ethan immediately wrapped his arms around me. I hate that I can't just be normal, I sobbed against his chest. I wish I could live like everyone else. I wish I could have a family without worrying about millions of people judging every decision I make. Ethan held me tighter. You don't have to worry about everything right now. His hand moved gently through my hair. I'll take care of the things I can. I looked up at him. I'll handle the company. The schedules. The people who need to know. Whatever happens, we'll deal with it together. He wiped my tears. But you need to make this decision with a peaceful mind. I stared at him. Then slowly, I placed my hand over my stomach. I want them. Ethan's expression softened. I want our babies. He pulled me tightly into his arms. I'll be the best partner I can be for you. He kissed my forehead. And I'll be the best father I can be to our triplets. I closed my eyes in his embrace. For so long, I'd been terrified of what pregnancy would take from me. My career. My freedom. My carefully protected image. But sitting there in Ethan's arms, I realized something. Maybe I didn't have to lose everything. Maybe we could build something new instead. It wouldn't be easy. Our relationship was still a secret. My pregnancy would eventually become impossible to hide. And the world would undoubtedly have something to say. But for the first time, I wasn't facing the future alone. I had Ethan. And I had 3 little hearts growing inside me. And somehow, that was enough to make me believe we could survive whatever came next. That evening, Ethan and I knew we couldn't keep everything hidden from our families any longer. We started with my parents. I had barely finished telling them about the pregnancy when their expressions hardened. Instead of happiness, they became furious. They immediately turned their anger toward Ethan. They accused him of deliberately getting me pregnant, of trying to trap me with a baby, and demanded to know how long we'd been together. When I finally admitted that Ethan and I had been in a relationship for years, their anger only became worse. "You've been hiding this from us for years?" I didn't answer. Honestly, I had expected their reaction. My parents had always pushed me to work harder and harder. More songs. More endorsements. More concerts. More money. To them, slowing down had never been an option, especially when I was at the peak of my career. So when they heard I was pregnant, they didn't see 3 grandchildren. They saw everything they believed I was about to lose. My career. My income. My opportunities. And they blamed Ethan for all of it. I finally lost my patience. "This is my life." I looked at them firmly. "You don't have to like my decision, but you don't get to make it for me." They continued arguing, but I refused to listen anymore. "I'm keeping my babies. And I'm staying with Ethan." Then I walked away. I didn't care whether they approved of me anymore. Thankfully, Ethan's parents reacted completely differently. They were shocked, of course, but once the initial surprise passed, they welcomed us warmly. They congratulated us. They asked how I was feeling. His mother hugged me and told me not to be afraid. His father congratulated Ethan and told him he would make a wonderful father. Their support made me feel like I could breathe again. But our parents weren't the biggest problem. My agency's CEO was. I had an upcoming world tour, and months of preparation had already gone into it. Venues were booked, sponsors were involved, contracts had been signed, and thousands of fans were waiting for me. We couldn't hide my pregnancy from the company forever. So Ethan and I told the CEO as soon as possible. The moment he heard the news, his expression changed. For a few seconds, he simply stared at us. Then he exploded. "You've ruined everything." His voice echoed through the office. He slammed his hand against the desk and started talking about the world tour, the sponsors, the money, the schedules, and everything the company had invested in me. But none of it mattered to me. Then he looked directly at me. "Get an abortion." I froze. Ethan immediately stepped forward. But before he could say anything, the CEO turned his anger toward him. "And you're fired." My blood boiled. "What? You've been sleeping with our biggest star for years behind the company's back. You're done." That was when I finally snapped. "You don't get to decide that." The CEO glared at me. "I am the CEO of this company. And I'm the artist making you millions." The room went silent. I stood my ground. "Show me the clause in my contract that says I'm forbidden from dating my manager." He didn't answer. "Show me where it says I can't get pregnant." Again, silence. "Exactly." I took a breath. "You signed me because I can sing, perform, and bring people to your company. You didn't buy my life." The CEO tried to argue that my pregnancy would destroy the world tour. I shook my head. "Then cancel the tour." He stared at me as though I had lost my mind. "I don't care." I reached for Ethan's hand. "I'm not getting rid of my children because they're inconvenient for your business." Then I looked directly at the CEO. "And I'm not abandoning the man I love because you don't approve of our relationship." The CEO's face darkened. "You'll regret this." "Maybe." I tightened my grip on Ethan's hand. "But at least I'll regret my own decision." I turned toward the door. "I don't care what happens to my career anymore." I looked down at my stomach. "I'm keeping my babies." Then Ethan and I walked out together. For the first time in years, I had no idea what my future looked like. My parents were furious. My agency was threatening my career. My world tour was hanging by a thread. And sooner or later, the entire world would discover that their perfect alpha idol was carrying triplets with his manager. But Ethan was still beside me. His hand was wrapped tightly around mine. And somehow, that was enough. Whatever happened next, we would face it together. For a few days, things finally seemed to settle down. After everything that had happened with my parents and the agency, Ethan stayed by my side almost constantly. He made sure I ate, reminded me to take my vitamins, and wouldn't let me spend hours worrying about what the future would look like. Slowly, I began to breathe again. The fear I'd carried since discovering my pregnancy wasn't completely gone, but it wasn't consuming me anymore. Then came my second appointment. I was 8 weeks pregnant. Ethan came with me, his hand wrapped around mine as we sat in the examination room. I was nervous, but there was also a strange excitement inside me. We were going to see our babies again. The doctor began the examination, studying the screen carefully. Then his expression changed. "There's something I need to correct from your previous scan." My heart immediately jumped. "Is something wrong?" "No," the doctor assured me. "Actually, everything looks healthy." He paused. "The previous scan was mistaken." I frowned. "Mistaken?" He nodded. "You aren't carrying triplets." I stared at him. For a moment, neither Ethan nor I spoke. Then, "How many?" I finally asked. "Twins." The doctor pointed toward the screen. "1 boy and 1 girl." I didn't know what to say. I'd spent days thinking about 3 babies. I'd imagined 3 little ones growing up together, and somehow, learning that there were only 2 left me unexpectedly disappointed. Ethan must have noticed because he squeezed my hand. "Hey." I looked at him. "2 is more than enough for 1 time," he said with a small smile. I laughed quietly through my tears. Then he leaned closer and whispered. Honestly, I was already terrified about having triplets. That made me laugh properly. The doctor continued explaining everything to us, reassuring us that both babies appeared healthy and that the earlier scan had simply been difficult to interpret accurately. We listened to their heartbeats. We asked questions. We talked about what we needed to do next. And when we finally left the hospital, I felt strangely peaceful. 2 babies. A son and a daughter. Our little family. For the first time, I was beginning to believe that maybe everything really could work out. But that feeling didn't last long. Because someone leaked the news. My pregnancy. My relationship with Ethan. And most importantly, Ethan was revealed as the father. Everything changed within seconds. My name exploded across social media. News outlets started publishing articles. Old photographs of Ethan and me were suddenly everywhere. People began analyzing every interaction we'd ever had, trying to figure out how long we'd been together. And then the comments started. They were horrible. People called me pathetic. A loser. A disappointment. Some said I'd thrown away the career I'd spent my entire life building. Others accused Ethan of manipulating me. Some claimed he'd deliberately gotten me pregnant to secure his place beside me. Thousands of people who had once called me their favorite idol were now telling me how much they hated me. I tried to stop reading. I really did. But every time I put my phone down, another notification appeared. Another insult. Another headline. Another person judging me. Eventually, I couldn't hold it together anymore. I sat on the edge of my bed and started crying. I cried until my chest hurt. I didn't do anything wrong. But the words sounded meaningless even to me. Then my parents made their own statement. Instead of defending me, they sided with the fans. They claimed Ethan had brainwashed me. They accused him of manipulating me and deliberately baby-trapping me. Reading those words from my own parents hurt more than anything strangers had said. I couldn't believe they were doing this to us. Then my CEO called. I barely managed to answer before he started shouting. "Do you realize what you've done?" I stayed silent. "You've ruined everything." He blamed me for the tour, the sponsorships, the company's reputation, the money they had invested in my career. Every word made my breathing faster. My hands started trembling. I couldn't take it anymore. I ended the call. The moment I lowered my phone, Ethan was beside me. "Liam." I couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down my face. "I can't do this." Ethan immediately pulled me into his arms. "Hey, look at me." I shook my head, burying my face against his chest. "I can't breathe." "Yes, you can." His voice remained calm. "Forget everything else. Don't look at your phone. Don't listen to them." He gently rubbed my back. "Just breathe with me." I tried. Slowly. In and out. Ethan stayed beside me the entire time. He didn't tell me that the hate didn't matter. He didn't pretend everything was going to be easy. He simply held me while I cried. "You're not alone, Liam." His arms tightened around me. "I'm here." I closed my eyes. Outside that bedroom, the entire world was talking about me. My fans were furious. My parents had turned against me. My CEO was blaming me for everything. My carefully protected relationship was no longer a secret. But inside Ethan's arms, I finally stopped listening to all of them. For that moment, there was only him, me, and the 2 little lives growing inside me. And somehow, that was enough to keep me from breaking completely. I thought the worst had already happened. The leaked pregnancy. The hateful comments. My parents turning against me. My CEO threatening my career. But then someone leaked my home address. It started with a few people gathering outside my house. Then the crowd grew. More and more fans arrived until the street outside my home was packed. They shouted my name. Some demanded that I come outside. Others filmed the entire thing and streamed it online. My security team tried to keep everyone away from the gates, but the situation quickly became impossible to control. Ethan couldn't stand watching it happen. "I'm going to talk to them," he said. I immediately shook my head. "No. Ethan, don't." But he believed he could calm them down. The moment he stepped outside, the crowd surged toward him. Someone shoved him. Then another person grabbed his clothes. Suddenly, several people were surrounding him. I watched from the window in horror as my bodyguards rushed forward. They pushed through the crowd and managed to pull Ethan back toward the house, but not before several of them were injured. Ethan had been hit and shoved around, and seeing him like that broke something inside me. The police eventually arrived. They forced the crowd to move away from the property and restored order. But I couldn't stop shaking. All I could think about was how close everything had come to becoming much worse. What if Ethan had been seriously hurt? What if one of the bodyguards hadn't reached him in time? What if the crowd had broken through the gates? I couldn't sleep that night. Then I discovered who had given my address to the fans. My parents. For a moment, I couldn't even process it. My own parents had exposed the place where I lived, knowing exactly how obsessive some of my fans could become. I called them. My voice shook with anger. "How could you do this to me?" They tried to explain themselves. I didn't care. "You knew what they were capable of." My voice broke. "You knew how dangerous this could become." They still tried to defend what they'd done. That was when something inside me finally went cold. From today onward, don't expect anything from me. I cut off every financial support I'd been giving them. The bills I'd paid. The money I'd sent. Everything. "I spent my entire life trying to make you proud," I told them. "And you chose to hurt me when I needed you most." I wiped my tears. "To me, you're dead." Then I ended the call. After that, I disappeared. For days, I barely touched my phone. I needed time to process everything that had happened. I had spent my entire life believing that being loved by millions meant I would never be alone. Now I understood how wrong I'd been. But one night, curiosity finally made me open social media again. I expected more hate. Instead, I found something I hadn't expected. Millions of people were defending me. Fans were calling out the toxic ones. They were condemning the people who had leaked my address. They were defending Ethan. They were telling others to leave us alone. And then I saw messages directed at me. "Liam, take all the time you need. Your real fans will still be here. Come back when your babies are born. You don't owe us your private life. Please stay safe, Liam." I stared at the screen until my eyes filled with tears. There were still people who cared. Not about the idol. Not about the celebrity. Not about the perfect image. They cared about me. I showed Ethan the messages. He read them quietly before looking at me. "See," he said softly. "You still have people who love you." For the first time in weeks, I smiled. That night, Ethan and I talked for hours. Eventually, I made a decision. I was tired of letting everyone else tell my story. So I decided to tell it myself. The next evening, I sat in front of a camera. There were no stylists. No company executives. No carefully prepared script. Just me. I looked directly into the camera. "I know many of you have heard about my pregnancy." I took a breath. It's true. I confirmed everything. My pregnancy. My relationship with Ethan. The fact that we'd been together for years. I didn't hide anymore. I understand that many of you are shocked. I know some of you may be disappointed. I placed my hand over my stomach. But this is my life, and these are my children. My voice trembled slightly. I'm going to become a father. I paused. And I'm choosing my family. Then I asked for one thing. Please give us privacy. I explained that I needed time away from the spotlight to focus on my pregnancy and my family. Before ending the video, I made one promise. I will come back. I smiled faintly. After my babies are born, I'll come back to you. Then I ended the recording. I stared at the video for several minutes before finally uploading it. I had no idea what would happen. But within hours, the video exploded. Millions watched it. People shared it across social media. Fans translated it into different languages. News outlets picked it up. And instead of the backlash I'd feared, I saw something completely different. Support. People praised me for finally telling the truth. They praised me for standing up for myself. They praised me for choosing my children despite the enormous pressure surrounding me. And the messages kept coming. We'll wait for you, Liam. I read those words again and again. Then I leaned back against Ethan, finally allowing myself to smile. My life had changed. My career might never be the same. The world would continue talking. But for the first time, I wasn't trying to please everyone. I had chosen Ethan. I had chosen our babies. And now, I had chosen myself. Whatever happened next, I was ready to face it. After everything that had happened, Ethan and I knew we couldn't stay in my old house. Our address had been leaked once. There was no guarantee it wouldn't happen again. Even with security around us, I couldn't bring myself to feel safe there anymore. Ethan's parents insisted that we move in with them. Their home was in a quieter area, away from the constant crowds and cameras surrounding my old life. You both should stay here, Ethan's mother told us. It's safer, and you won't have to worry about strangers showing up. We eventually agreed. And somehow, that decision changed everything. Life in Ethan's parents' home was peaceful. There were no flashing cameras outside the windows. No reporters waiting near the gates. No fans shouting my name. No endless meetings. For the first time in years, I woke up without immediately reaching for my phone to check what people were saying about me. I could simply wake up, eat breakfast, and spend the day with Ethan. My agency eventually made its decision too. They removed me from their management. After everything that had happened, they no longer wanted me representing the company. Strangely enough, I wasn't devastated. A part of me had already expected it. I'd spent years building my career under someone else's control, but now I was beginning to think differently. Maybe I didn't need them. Maybe I could rebuild everything myself. I could produce my own music. Create my own company. Manage my own career. For once, I wasn't thinking about what everyone else wanted me to become. I was thinking about what I wanted. And as my pregnancy progressed, that feeling only became stronger. Without the constant pressure of work and the outside world, I finally had time to enjoy it. Ethan, however, became completely obsessed with taking care of me. He went from being my manager to acting like my full-time caretaker. I couldn't even stand up without him asking, "Where are you going?" "The kitchen." "I'll come with you. I can walk to the kitchen myself." "I know." Yet he'd still follow me. If I tried carrying anything, he'd immediately take it from me. If I stood for too long, he'd tell me to sit down. If I complained about back pain, he'd appear with a pillow and start massaging my back before I could even ask. His parents found it hilarious. One morning, his mother caught him following me around the house with a glass of water. "You know he's pregnant, not made of glass, right?" Ethan looked completely serious. "He's carrying our babies." She laughed. I nearly choked on my breakfast. His cooking became another part of his new obsession. He wanted to make sure I was eating properly, so he started preparing almost every meal himself. Some dishes were delicious. Others were questionable. One evening, he proudly placed dinner in front of me. "I made your favorite." I stared at the plate. "This doesn't look like my favorite." "It is." "What did you put in it?" "Why are you asking so many questions?" I narrowed my eyes. "Ethan." He sighed. I experimented. I took one bite. He watched me carefully. I swallowed with difficulty. "It's unique." His eyes narrowed. "You hate it." "I don't hate it." "You made that face." "What face?" "The face you make when you're trying not to hurt my feelings." I couldn't stop laughing. Eventually, Ethan admitted he'd accidentally used the wrong seasoning. But he still ate the entire plate himself. "See," he said proudly. "Nothing wrong with it. You just don't want to waste it." Exactly. His obsession with the babies was even worse. He talked to my stomach constantly. Sometimes he'd sit beside me and gently place his hand over my belly. "Hello, little ones." I would laugh. "They can't understand you yet. They should start learning my voice early." Then he'd sing to them. Unfortunately, Ethan's singing was absolutely terrible. One evening, he started singing a lullaby so badly that I covered my ears. "Ethan, please stop." He continued. "You're going to traumatize them. They'll appreciate their father's effort. They're going to ask why their father sounds like a dying cat." He looked offended. "I'm not that bad." I laughed. "You are." He turned toward my stomach. "Don't listen to your father. He's jealous." I shook my head, laughing until my stomach hurt. Those silly moments became my favorite part of pregnancy. There were no cameras capturing them. No fans watching. No headlines. Just Ethan being ridiculous. And when I became tired, he'd massage my feet or shoulders until I fell asleep. Sometimes he'd simply sit beside me, resting his hand over my stomach while we talked about the future. But underneath all his excitement, I could see that Ethan was getting more nervous every day. The closer we got to the birth, the more he worried. One night, I found him staring at his phone with a deeply troubled expression. "What happened?" He looked up. "I'm researching babies." I smiled. "You've been researching babies for 3 hours. There's too much information." I laughed. We'll learn together. He sighed. What if they both cry at the same time? We'll handle it. What if they both need us? We'll handle it. What if one of them gets sick? We'll handle it. What if I'm not a good father? That question made me quiet. I reached for his hand. You will be. He looked at me. How do you know? Because you're already terrified about getting it right. He smiled faintly. Then he placed his palm gently against my stomach. I'm still scared. So am I. He looked at me. But we're doing this together. He nodded. Then, after a moment, he whispered, 2 babies. I laughed. You're still scared of the number? They're going to outnumber us. I couldn't stop laughing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surrounded by assistants, stylists, producers, security guards, or screaming fans. I was simply Liam. A man waiting to become a father. And Ethan was simply Ethan. The mysterious man who had once been my manager and had somehow become my home. Our life wasn't perfect. We still had problems waiting for us. We still didn't know what would happen to my career. We still had an entire world that had once judged us. But inside that quiet house, none of it mattered. Every morning, Ethan kissed me before I got out of bed. Every evening, he massaged my aching back. Every night, he whispered ridiculous things to our babies. And somewhere between his terrible singing, his disastrous cooking, and his endless worrying, I found something I'd never realized I had been missing. A peaceful life. Not the glamorous life I'd once dreamed about. Just a small, quiet life with the man I loved and the 2 babies we were waiting to meet. And honestly, I had never been happier. With all the love Ethan gave me, I had started believing that maybe pregnancy wouldn't be as difficult as everyone warned me. I couldn't have been more wrong. As the weeks passed, my body became heavier, and the pregnancy became harder to ignore. My back hurt constantly. My legs felt swollen and tired. Sleeping through the night became almost impossible, and even getting comfortable on the bed felt like a challenge. And my mood? It was a disaster. I could get angry over the smallest things. Sometimes Ethan would ask me something completely innocent, and I'd snap at him before immediately regretting it. He never got angry. Instead, he'd just stare at me for a few seconds before saying, "Okay, I'll blame the babies." I'd glare at him. "Don't blame my children. Then I'll blame you, Ethan." He'd immediately raise his hands. "I'm sorry. I love you." And somehow, I'd end up laughing despite myself. But beneath those little moments, I was struggling more than I let him see. I missed my old life. I missed the stage. I missed the lights going dark before my entrance, the deafening screams from the crowd, and the moment thousands of people would start singing my songs with me. I'd spent years performing in front of enormous crowds. Sometimes it felt like the entire world was watching me. Now, I was mostly sitting inside a quiet house. I still sang. Sometimes I'd sit on the balcony with Ethan and quietly sing songs I'd written. Sometimes I'd practice just to keep my voice from feeling rusty. But it wasn't the same. There was something about standing on a stage in front of millions of people that I couldn't replace. And I hated admitting how much I missed it. There were days when the emotions became too much. I'd suddenly start crying without knowing why. Sometimes I'd sit alone in a room and wonder why I felt so empty when Ethan was only a few steps away. He was always there. He cared for me. He loved me. Yet pregnancy sometimes made me feel lonely in a way I couldn't explain. Ethan never made me feel guilty about it. If he found me crying, he'd simply sit beside me and hold me. He didn't always ask questions. Sometimes he just let me cry. Meanwhile, my belly kept growing. Month by month, it became bigger and heavier. And the babies became more active. At first, their movements had been tiny. But eventually, I could feel every little kick. Sometimes one would move, and moments later the other would follow. I'd put my hand over my stomach and laugh. "Ethan, they're moving again." He'd immediately come running. "Really?" "Yes." He'd place his hand against my belly. Then we'd wait. Nothing. He'd stare at me. I stared back. "They were just moving." "I believe you. They're doing it on purpose." A few seconds later, one of the babies would kick. Ethan's eyes would widen. "There." I'd laugh. "See? They really are strong." Unfortunately. Some days, though, their constant movement exhausted me. There were nights when I couldn't sleep because one baby seemed determined to practice gymnastics while the other decided to join in. I'd lie there completely exhausted. "Ethan. Tell your children to go to sleep." He'd place his hand on my stomach. "Guys, your father needs rest." I'd laugh. "They don't listen to you. I'll have a serious conversation with them tomorrow." Those moments made everything a little easier. Then came Ethan's 30th birthday. I wanted to do something special for him, but neither of us wanted anything extravagant. That evening, we went out onto the balcony. The night was quiet, the air cool, and the city lights stretched out beneath us. I thought we were simply going to spend the evening together. Then Ethan suddenly took my hand. I looked at him. He seemed nervous. "Ethan?" He took a deep breath. Then he lowered himself onto one knee. My eyes widened. "Ethan." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "Liam, I know our life hasn't exactly gone according to plan." I smiled through the tears already forming in my eyes. But I wouldn't change it. He opened the box. "I don't want a perfect life. I want our life." His eyes never left mine. "I want you. I want our children. I want the sleepless nights, the arguments, the terrible meals I've somehow convinced you to eat." I laughed through my tears. "And I want every ordinary day with you." He held out the ring. "Will you marry me?" "Yes." I answered so quickly that Ethan actually blinked. "Yes?" I laughed. "Yes, you idiot." He stood up and immediately pulled me into his arms. I wrapped my arms around him, laughing as tears ran down my cheeks. "You didn't even let me finish. You were taking too long." He laughed and slipped the ring onto my finger. I stared at it for a long moment. I was going to marry Ethan. The man who had started as my manager. The man I'd secretly loved for years. The man who had stayed beside me when the entire world seemed determined to tear us apart. Later that night, he placed his hand over my stomach. "Do you think they're happy about this?" I smiled. "They probably think you should have proposed sooner." He looked offended. "I was planning the perfect proposal." "You were shaking." "I was nervous." "You were terrified." "That's because you matter to me." That answer silenced me. I leaned against him, smiling. It was one of the happiest nights of my life. But the final months were anything but easy. When I entered my 9th month, even walking became difficult. My belly had grown so large that every step felt like an effort. Getting out of bed required planning. Walking from one room to another sometimes left me exhausted. And Ethan became even more protective. He practically followed me everywhere. If I stood up, he stood up. If I walked, he walked beside me. If I reached for something, he reached for it first. One morning, I tried to get a glass of water. Ethan appeared beside me immediately. "I'll get it. I can get water." "I know." "Then why are you following me?" "Because you're my fiancé." I rolled my eyes. "You've been waiting for an excuse to say that, haven't you?" "Absolutely." He was constantly calling me his fiancé. "My fiancé needs to rest. My fiancé needs water. My fiancé shouldn't be standing too long. My fiancé needs another pillow. My fiancé." "Ethan." He grinned. "What? You've said fiancé at least 20 times today." "I like saying it." I tried to hide my smile. "But you love hearing it." I looked away. He was right. I did. Especially on the days when I felt exhausted and overwhelmed. Because every time Ethan called me his fiancé, it reminded me that despite everything I'd lost, I had gained something too. Someone who chose me. Someone who stayed. Someone who was just as terrified about becoming a parent as I was, yet never stopped trying to make me feel safe. At night, he'd massage my aching feet, rub my back, and carefully place his hand over my enormous belly. "Almost there," he'd whisper. I'd close my eyes. Sometimes the babies would kick beneath his palm. He'd smile immediately. "See? They're ready to meet us." I'd laugh softly. "You're the one who's not ready." He'd sigh. "2 babies at once." Then he'd look genuinely terrified. "What if they both cry?" "We'll handle it." "What if they both need me?" "We'll handle it." "What if I don't know what I'm doing?" I would take his hand. "Neither of us does." He'd stare at me. "That's not comforting." I'd laugh. But then I'd rest my head against his shoulder. "We'll learn together." And somehow, that was enough. Pregnancy had taken me away from the stage. It had changed my body, my career, and almost every part of my life. There were days I missed who I used to be. There were days I cried without knowing why. There were days when I felt completely exhausted. But there were also quiet mornings, ridiculous conversations, Ethan's terrible singing, tiny kicks beneath my hand, and the ring on my finger. And every night, when Ethan held me close and whispered to our babies, I realized something. I hadn't lost my entire life. I was simply building a new one. And soon, the 3 of us, or rather, the 4 of us, would finally meet. One night, after 9 long months of waiting, the day we'd been both terrified and excited about finally arrived. I woke up in the middle of the night with a strange pain in my stomach. At first, I thought it was another uncomfortable night. Then another wave came, stronger than the first. I reached for Ethan. "Ethan." He woke immediately. "What happened?" I took a shaky breath. "I think it's time." He stared at me for a second. "Time for?" I gave him an exhausted look. "Our babies, Ethan." His eyes widened. They're coming? Despite the pain, I almost laughed. Yes. The calm, composed man who had handled my entire pregnancy suddenly forgot how to function. Within minutes, the entire house was awake. Ethan's parents were preparing everything, the house staff were helping, and Ethan was running around like he was the one giving birth. Why are you panicking more than me? I asked. Because I'm becoming a father. You've known that for 9 months. Knowing and actually becoming one are different. Despite everything, I couldn't help smiling. Thankfully, the birth went far more smoothly than I'd imagined. After months of discomfort, fear, and anticipation, I finally heard the 2 tiny cries I'd been waiting for. Our babies were here. A beautiful little boy. And a beautiful little girl. The moment they were placed beside me, I burst into tears. I stared at their tiny faces, their little fingers, their impossibly small features. They were real. Our babies were finally here. Ethan stood beside me, completely speechless, his eyes filled with tears. We actually have a family, he whispered. I reached for his hand. We do. He kissed my forehead before looking down at our babies again. Hi, little ones. His voice trembled. I'm your dad. I smiled through my tears. And in that moment, everything I'd been through felt worth it. I returned home the following day. Ethan's parents had prepared the entire house for the babies. There were 2 beautiful cribs waiting for them, tiny clothes everywhere, bottles neatly arranged, and more blankets than I thought 2 babies could possibly need. The house that had once been quiet was suddenly filled with the softest sounds. And Ethan became completely obsessed with them. He could spend hours simply watching our babies sleep. One afternoon, I found him standing beside their cribs. What are you doing? Looking at them. They're sleeping. I know. You've been standing there for 20 minutes. He looked at me seriously. They're beautiful. I couldn't argue. They really were. And somehow, they were incredibly calm babies. They barely cried. Even when they woke during the night, Ethan or the house staff would immediately take care of them. If I tried getting out of bed, Ethan would stop me. Go back to sleep. But the babies. I've got them. He'd disappear for a while, take care of them, and return once they'd settled. Sometimes he'd climb into bed and whisper, "They're sleeping again." Then he'd pull me into his arms. Everyone was determined to let me recover properly. Ethan's parents constantly checked on me, the house staff helped with the babies, and Ethan refused to let me do more than I needed to. For the first time in months, I could actually rest. Watching Ethan become a father was one of the sweetest things I'd ever seen. The man who had once been terrified of raising 2 babies now couldn't stay away from them. He talked to them constantly. He sang to them, still terribly. He bought them ridiculous amounts of clothes. And whenever one of them smiled, he'd immediately come running to show me. Did you see that? Ethan, I was right here. But did you see it? I laughed. Yes. Our baby smiled at me. Obviously. Why obviously? Because you're their favorite. He looked ridiculously proud. A month after giving birth, I finally felt ready to speak to the world. Ethan sat beside me as I recorded a short video. I told everyone the truth. Our babies had been born. A boy and a girl. I shared a few pictures, carefully protecting their privacy. I also thanked everyone who had supported me during the most difficult months of my life. The response overwhelmed me. Millions of fans congratulated us. Messages poured in from around the world. People who had waited patiently for my return celebrated the news. Even other idols reached out to congratulate me. Some sent gifts. Some posted messages. Some simply told me they were happy that I was doing well. I had expected criticism. Instead, I was surrounded by love. It made me realize just how many people had been waiting for me to come back. Then my parents reached out. They wanted to meet the babies. I refused. They argued that they were still my parents. I reminded them of everything they'd done. They had exposed my address. They had encouraged the hatred against Ethan. They had publicly accused him of manipulating me. They had endangered my family. I don't want you meeting my children. They continued trying to convince me. I finally told them, go to hell. Then I ended the conversation. My children deserved peace. And I wasn't willing to risk that peace for people who had already betrayed me. Not long after that, another major entertainment company contacted me. They wanted me back. At first, I was suspicious. I'd already experienced what happened when a company cared more about money than my life. So Ethan and I examined the offer carefully. But this company was different. They understood that I was a father now. They offered a contract that allowed me to maintain a healthy balance between my career and my children. They respected my privacy. They were willing to work around my family instead of expecting me to sacrifice my family for work. For the first time, I felt like a company actually saw me as a person. So I signed. And 6 months after giving birth, I finally returned to the stage. I still remember standing backstage that night. My hands were trembling. I could hear the crowd screaming my name. Thousands of people were waiting for me. And backstage, Ethan stood with our twins. He smiled at me. Ready? I took a deep breath. I think so. Then the lights came on. I walked onto the stage. The crowd erupted. For a moment, I couldn't move. I had imagined this moment so many times. I'd wondered whether people would still care. Whether they'd forgotten me. Whether I'd still belong on that stage. But the moment I looked at the audience, I realized I'd been wrong. They hadn't forgotten me. They were waiting. I started singing. And almost immediately, the entire arena sang along. The sound hit me so hard that my eyes filled with tears. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed this. The music. The lights. The stage. The feeling of thousands of voices singing my songs back to me. For those few minutes, everything else disappeared. I wasn't thinking about the scandal. I wasn't thinking about my parents. I wasn't thinking about the company that had abandoned me. I was simply Liam again. The idol who loved music. When the concert ended, I rushed backstage. Ethan was waiting for me with our twins. He smiled. You were incredible. I laughed through my tears. I missed it so much. I know. He kissed my forehead. One of our babies made a tiny sound in his arms. I looked at them and smiled. My biggest fans are backstage. Ethan laughed. Your smallest ones. Soon, offers began arriving again. New songs. Collaborations. Endorsements. Concerts. Opportunities I'd never expected to receive after everything that had happened. My career was growing again. But this time, it felt different. I wasn't working to satisfy my parents. I wasn't terrified of losing everything. I wasn't trying to prove myself to people who had abandoned me. Because now, whenever I walked onto a stage, I knew exactly what I was coming home to. Ethan. Our son. Our daughter. Our little family. My 27th birthday. Then came my 27th birthday. I didn't want a huge celebration. After everything we'd been through, I wanted something quiet. Just Ethan, our twins, and the people who had stood beside us. But Ethan clearly had other plans. That morning, he woke me with our daughter in his arms and our son safely tucked against his chest. Happy birthday, fiancé. I smiled sleepily. You woke me up just to say that? No. He grinned. We're going somewhere. I immediately became suspicious. Ethan. Get dressed. Where? You'll see. A little while later, we were sitting in the car. When we finally stopped, I looked through the window and froze. We were standing in front of a beautiful house in one of the most secure and private neighborhoods in the city. The area was peaceful, surrounded by greenery, with strict security and private entrances. I looked at Ethan. What are we doing here? He took my hand. This is our new home. I stared at him. What? I bought it. I couldn't speak. He smiled. After everything that happened with your address being leaked, I never want you to feel unsafe again. He squeezed my hand. It's in one of the safest neighborhoods in the city. There's private security, controlled access, and plenty of space for the kids. My eyes immediately filled with tears. Ethan. He opened the front door. Inside was everything we'd ever dreamed about. A beautiful living room. A spacious kitchen. A private garden. And upstairs, 2 bedrooms already prepared for our twins. Their names were written on little wooden plaques above their doors. I walked into the room slowly, overwhelmed. You did all this? With some help from my parents. I turned toward him. He was smiling. Happy birthday. I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. I walked straight into his arms. You're ridiculous. I know. I didn't ask for this. I know. You didn't have to. I know. I laughed through my tears. Then why? He kissed my forehead. Because you've spent your entire life working to give everyone else something. His hand rested gently against my cheek. I wanted to give you somewhere you could finally just be Liam. I hugged him tighter. For years, I'd lived in beautiful houses that never truly felt like home. There had always been cameras. People. Pressure. Expectations. But standing there with Ethan and our children, I finally understood what home was supposed to feel like. Safe. Warm. Quiet. Ours. That evening, we celebrated my birthday in the garden. There were no cameras. No reporters. No enormous party. Just Ethan, our twins, his parents, and the people we loved. Ethan even tried singing "Happy Birthday" to me. His singing was still terrible. I covered my ears. You've had an entire year to improve. He looked offended. I've been busy becoming a father. I laughed. One of our babies made a tiny sound, and Ethan immediately looked over. See? He likes my singing. He probably wants you to stop. Ethan gasped. How dare you? I laughed until my stomach hurt. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Ethan and I stood together on the balcony of our new home. The city lights glittered in the distance. I leaned against him. 27. He kissed the top of my head. How does it feel? I smiled. Different. Good different? I looked through the glass doors toward our children's rooms. Very good. I had once thought my 27th year would be about rebuilding my career. Instead, it had given me something far more precious. A fiancé. 2 beautiful children. A career I was rebuilding on my own terms. And finally, a home where I could feel completely safe. I rested my head against Ethan's shoulder. Thank you. He looked at me. For what? For giving me a home. He smiled. You gave me one first. And under the quiet night sky, I realized that after everything we'd survived, I finally had the life I'd never known I wanted. Not the perfect life. Not the glamorous life. Just ours. And for the first time, that was more than enough.